there, my name is Matthew O'Reilly. I'm an artist and educator. This video is about building a crate. So let's get started. So there's kind of two major parts to this video. We got this little Tinkercad model I put together. We'll look at that and talk about the anatomy of a crate, the different components, how to derive your measurements for various parts, and the assembly. After that, we'll look at Google Sheets, put this little file together to help calculate your material cut list. So it's kind of handy. You can just put in your dimensions for your sculpture, and then it'll pump out all the dimensions for not only your panels, but the frames, etc. We'll talk a bit more about that later. So let's look at this model. Great, so to begin, we'll take a peek at this little sculpture down here, or up here. We have a cool little pyramid. Maybe it's hypothetically clay. Our pyramid or our sculpture is 18 by 18 by 18, and we're trying to determine the interior volume of our crate. You'll notice this little invisible box is a bit larger than the pyramid, and I've done that because I want folks to visualize the padding. So when you're making a crate, you want to also consider the size of the padding. In this case, I wanted a padding to be an inch thick on all sides. But you can imagine if there's padding an inch on the left and an inch on the right, then you'll actually increase all the total dimensions by 2 inches, if that makes sense. So you'll add 2 inches to length, width, and the height of your piece. So 18 by 18 by 18 plus 2 on all sides, we get 20 by 20 by 20. Cool. So let's move over to talk about our panels for a bit. At the end, we'll have 6 different panels: a base, a lid, and a long side panel. There's a pair of those, and a pair of short side panels. Now, the short side panels are the easiest to get the measurements for. They're equal to the length and the height of your sculpture. So in this case, 20 by 20. For the long side panels, you want to add the material thickness of both your ply and your framing to the length. And then the height is the same as the sculpture. And then the base and the lid, you'll want to add your, not the length and the width of your sculpture, you want to add the material thickness again to both dimensions. So we'll talk about the material thickness a bit more now. I like to build my my crates out of 1/2 inch plywood and 2x2s. 2x2s are actually 1.5 by 1.5 inches. A little pro tip: sometimes it's nicer to buy 2x4s and cut them down to the dimension. You often get just straighter, better wood, and for the same cost, if not cheaper, but with a bit of elbow grease. The panels are assembled with the 1/2 inch ply and the 2x2s here. You can see how they come together. We use butt joints to assemble our framing. You can see the framing just sits nicely on top of the plywood. To cut this pair, the pink pair of framing, it's pretty easy. It's just the same dimension as the panel. So this is a 20 by 20, therefore one of the sides can just be equal to that length. So that piece of framing is 20 by 20. For cutting this shorter pair, this orange pair, you'll want to account for the material thickness of the framing on either side. So each piece of framing is 1.5 inches. Add those two together, you get a total of 3. Therefore, this piece of framing is 20 inches, subtract 3. So this piece is 17, and it'll fit nice and snug. When I'm assembling this, I'll flip this panel over, and I'll use brad nails, usually 1.5 inches for this project, 18 gauge, and just tack all that together. And I'll repeat that process for all the panels until I get them all finished and laid out looking like this. Once you have all the panels assembled, we can come over here to our sculpture and how it kind of gets put in. Most crates are top loaded, though you might prefer a side load. We'll talk top load for now. I usually assemble the crates with screws. I use partially threaded 2.5-inch screws, and I'll just drive that through the edge of the panel, usually 3 screws into the base. You can kind of see here our kind of shorter panel gets sandwiched by the 2 long panels. So I'll screw in all the sides until the sculpture is fully enclosed, and then I'll just go ahead and drop the lid on it. I usually put a bit of spray paint or something on the screws on the lid to communicate to the art handlers that's where to unscrew first and how to remove the lid. In addition, after you've kind of assembled your crate, it's sometimes useful to use stencils. You can spray paint a little fragile symbol on there, this side up kind of thing. The big thing you want to do is make sure your sculpture doesn't move. So I like to overstuff my crate with padding, maybe like 1/4 inch above the crate, and then when I screw on the lid, it packs things pretty tight. It doesn't work for all things. Of course, like a super fragile ceramic piece, that might be dangerous, but the goal is just to make things not move. Great. So let's move over to the crate dimension calculator. So I made this with the 6 little cells here that are highlighted in green. These are your kind of fiddle cells. You can fiddle with them. You can play with the dimensions of your sculpture. You can play with your material thickness. So maybe you're using 1/4 inch instead of 1/2 inch. Maybe you're using 2x4s instead of the 2x2s. Maybe you want 3 inches of packing. In either case, you input your dimensions and your thicknesses and your desired padding, and it'll generate you your cut list as well as your crate dimensions. I thought the crate dimensions would be useful because some places like UPS or FedEx might have like a big price jump after 30 inches on one side. So anyway, knowing your final dimensions is really useful and might be useful to work backwards from even. Down here you can see our 6 panels. Each panel has its dimension according to our sculpture up here, and then we also have the 4 pieces of framing that need to be cut to these lengths here for each individual panel. So hopefully that's useful. I'll include a link to both this Excel sheet as well as the 3D model just down below. And the last thing I want to talk about would be the runners. A lot of crates have these kind of runners on the bottom. They're meant for pallet jacks. If you get longer than 36 inches, maybe 40, definitely 48, you'd probably consider runners. I'm not going to go into too much detail, but if you do put them on, make sure a pallet jack can actually fit underneath. Usually that's about 3.5, 4 inches of clearance you need. In addition, you want to take into account the distance between the forks. For a small 24 inch by 24 inch by 24 inch crate, you can have runners and just have the crate lifted by one of the forks on a pallet jack. That can be useful for really heavy crates. Alternatively, you could just lift it with handles, and the way I like to put handles is I would just install one or two additional pieces of framing going across the side or the center of each panel. It would increase the strength of the crate and then also give a nice place to grab onto. Great, so I think that is all. Thanks for watching. Hopefully that's helpful. If you have any suggestions, maybe comment those below or shoot me an email. Otherwise, please like and subscribe. Have a great day. Bye.